Today on Passion for Food, we'll be making these low-calorie, healthy potato chips in the microwave. Now, don't let the fact that these have about half the calories of the conventional kind chip away at your confidence. These are every bit as delicious and super easy to make, so let's peel on out of here and get started. And for our potato, we're going to be using the classic russet. And speaking of peels, I'm going to leave mine on there. You can peel these if you want, but you get lots of trace minerals and nutrients from the peel, and it tastes good too. So I'm just going to leave that on there. And rather than just starting to slice at one end and winding up with a bunch of weird little potato chips, I like cutting those in half. And for the actual slicing, you are going to want a mandolin or some other slicing device. You could try and use a knife if you want, but you need really small, really consistent pieces, so it's very difficult that way. So we're going to go ahead and set our mandolin to the thinnest setting. For me, that's setting number 1, and we're going to go ahead and slice between 2 and 3 ounces of potatoes. The amount is going to vary. You're just going to have to figure out what works best for you. Don't worry if you don't have one of these mandolins or another slicing implement. I have a bonus recipe coming at the end just for you, so stay tuned for that. We can see the kind of thinness we're looking for here. You should basically be able to almost see through these. They should be slightly translucent. And I know I said these were going to be low in calories, so let's do a couple of quick calculations and figure out just exactly how low. So we've got 90 grams of raw russet potatoes here. That's a little more than 3 ounces. And just to err on the side of caution, we will say that the russets have 0.79 calories per gram. So for this batch, that gives us a total of 71.1 calories. And that totally wasn't just an excuse for me to bust out that cool retro calculator. Anyway, now that we've crunched those numbers, it's time to actually get the chips crunchy. So you want to grab one sheet of parchment paper that will fit inside of your microwave. Now, at this point, if you want, you can add a thin layer of oil. I actually started out doing it that way, but after 2 days of experimentation, I found that adding oil changes the flavor quite a bit, and you wind up more tasting the oil than you do the potato. So I definitely recommend you try it without the oil first, just to get a taste for that full-on spud-tacular potato goodness. That way, if you then want to experiment with a little spray oil or butter, you'll be able to register those flavor changes and you'll know exactly why they're happening. Anyway, we just want to get these layered out evenly. It's alright if the edges are barely touching, but they should not be overlapping at all. And again, to cut to the very root of what a potato chip is, at least at first I like to keep the seasoning simple. I'm literally just going to add a pinch of salt to these. And we're just going to lift and transport these very carefully into our microwave. You can use a plate for this if you would like. But the plates often add extra thermal mass, causing them to cook slightly slower, but it still works fine that way. And for this amount of potato, I would recommend 3.5 minutes, and then you want to start checking in 30-second increments. You see how there's a little bit of browning in the middle, but they're still pale. That means they're not ready yet. And here we are after another minute. You can see they've gotten nice and brown. This is about as brown as we want them. So we'll go ahead and pull these out and transfer them to some sort of rack to cool. We do want to let these sit for at least a minute or two. They'll get much crispier and crunchier when they've come down to room temperature. And you know, looking at that big pile of crispy, salty potato chips, it's almost hard to believe that's only 71 calories, isn't it? In fact, just for funsies, let's do a side-by-side comparison. So first up, let's grab one serving of some standard store-bought potato chips. That's about 1 ounce. Which is about 28 grams. I prefer working in grams. It just makes the math a little easier for me. There we go. That's about 1 ounce, slightly over. I'm not going to worry about that. And that comes out to about 160 calories. You can see it's not too bad. It's not a terribly small number of chips there. Now let's compare that to our homemade chips. Now this is a different batch of these I made. I pre-weighed out 200 grams of raw potatoes, which comes out to just under 160 calories in total. So we're really just weighing these for fun, as they wound up being much lighter than the store-bought chips. And I can't really get the calorie number from the final weight just because of the way the math works. I would either need more information or specialized equipment, so it's just much easier to calculate that number from the raw potato. But even given how much lighter these are, you can see we wound up with almost double the weight, but I would say realistically we have about 3 times the volume of actual chips here. So let's just grab these and have a look at them side by side. I really think that visual is pretty striking. Both bowls contain exactly 160 calories worth of potato chips. Now, if you're hungry, which bowl would you rather have? And making these ourselves, we can season them just any way we would like. But before we get cracking to the final chip reveal, here's our quick little bonus recipe, these spiralized and hash brown potatoes. These vegetable spiralizers are awesome for all kinds of things. I use them for zucchini, noodles, and more, but I'm going to show you a quick little spiralized hash brown. These things feed the potato in against a set of blades that both cuts and slices at the same time. It's pretty cool. I'm a fan of these things. Now, okay, I know what you might be thinking. Hey, Graham, dude, I didn't have a mandolin. What makes you think I have a vegetable spiralizer? Well, okay, fair enough. On to Plan C with the super secret double bonus recipe. And all we're going to need this time is some sort of grater, a hand grater, a box grater, whatever kind of grater you have. And we just want to grate a roughly equivalent size pile of these great potatoes. We don't want a great deal of difference between these two piles. And just like before, we want to grab a piece of parchment paper that will fit nicely into our microwave. With our grated hash brown, we want to lay those out into a pretty thin, even layer. The thinner it is, the quicker it'll cook and the crispier it'll be. So if you don't want yours to be as crispy all the way through, you can make them a little thicker. And as for our spiralized potatoes, we can actually let them sit in kind of a little nest. It'll flatten as it cooks, and all those little air pockets will actually help it crisp up and cook evenly. And because these are so much heavier than our potato chips, I do recommend doing it on a plate or using one of these little cutting boards like I'm doing just to help us transfer that into the microwave. Additionally, I am going to put just about 1 second of spray oil on each one of these. That's just to help us simulate that traditional fried hash brown flavor, along, of course, with a slightly more generous pinch of salt. Remember, this is a lot more potato than before. And that also means it's going to take a little longer to cook. So I'm going to start this at 4.5 minutes and then check every 30 seconds. So after about 5.5 minutes, our hash brown was the doneness I wanted. You'll see it's browning around the outside, but it's still a little pale in the middle. That means it's going to be crispy on the outside and a little bit chewy in the middle, just like a hash brown should be. And after about 1 more minute, our spiralized potatoes are also ready. You'll see those are a little browner. I like those crispy all the way through, although you can experiment, of course, and see how you like them. But just like before, I do recommend letting these sit and cool for at least 1 minute. At which point we can go ahead and give these a try. I was actually impressed how easy it was to make a hash brown that really seemed like a traditional hash brown this way, with, far less effort and a lot less oil. And you can see we've actually maintained a little bit of the chewiness and flexibility in the middle. I don't like my hash browns to be, chewy all the way through like a French fry. These are very hash browns. Alright, anyway, back to the potato chips. Now, one of the cool things about doing it in the microwave is it heats the internal starches so fast you wind up getting some little bubbles like that on the surface, making these just so light and crispy. The ones on the right here were made exactly the same way, just with a little bit of tahini seasoning, which I like to describe kind of like Latin salt and vinegar chips. I was really surprised by how perfect these easy microwave potato chips came out, but they really are delicious, so I hope you give this a try. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Passion for Food. If you have, give me a thumbs up below and consider subscribing and sharing this video to help our channel grow. This has been Graham with Passion for Food.